everybody. This is Jeff. I've got two great guests today, Neil and Ruben. And, on this show, we take 3 to 4 of the popular stories that are affecting podcasting, live streaming, and YouTubing. We break them down. We say, what do these mean? What does the future mean for, some of these stories? And how do they apply to your small business and your content creation endeavors? So I got two guests, and luckily I wrote nice little intros for you. I got Niall Mackay, director of 7 Million Bikes, all the way from Vietnam. It's a podcast creation company helping you to host, produce, and publish your podcast. Neil, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
And Ruben Jay, he's the president of MultiMediaMouth Media, along with being an author, philanthropist, astronaut, and he still manages to have the most incredible hair. He's the host of the Ruben Jay Show. It is Ruben Jay.
Well, I'm happy to be here, but it's MultiMediaMouth. So
what did I call you?
MultiMouth Media, which actually might be a good rebranding down the road.
There you go. You got a spinoff.
There you go.
And I don't know if did I also mispronounce beekeeper? I think I might have said astronaut.
Neither one is accurate, so it works for me.
Well, I want to welcome Neil and Ruben to the show, and we're going to get right into our first story tonight from The Hollywood Reporter. They're saying YouTube to let advertisers target podcast listeners. And this article, we know that YouTube launched a beta version of this in 2020, and the new version is going to increase ad time from 15 to 30 seconds. So have anybody tried advertising for a podcast on any medium? Have you tried Facebook or any other of the podcast players? Let's start there. Have you ever tried just advertising your podcast?
Yeah, I've tried on Facebook and it absolutely fails. Like I've just written about it. I'm going to be posting about it soon. It just doesn't work like at all.
I've done the same. I've done Facebook a couple of times. I've tried Instagram, and really all it does is it doesn't really ever convert. It gets your brand in front of a bunch of eyeballs that may or may not be real, but usually the click-through rate is extremely low and not really worth the money. So I'd be interested to see how this actually works on the YouTube platform.
One thing I find, it's very hard to take somebody in another platform to do another thing. So if you're scrolling through social media, you're looking at pictures, you're watching videos, to get them out of there to go to an app to subscribe, that's a tough move.
Yeah.
You think about your own behavior, right? You're scrolling down, you're just chilling, you're looking at Facebook, you're like, oh, a podcast, hold on, I'm going to click that. I might now spend half an hour to an hour suddenly listening to a podcast that I didn't know about 10 seconds ago. Like, that's just not going to happen like that, is it?
Yeah, the best way to really grow your podcast is never going to be through paid advertisement. It's going to be either through encouraging your listeners to share it with somebody who might find it interesting, or through exchanging ads on another podcast. It's not going to be paying $10 on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or any other social platform. The only thing that I've ever seen any sort of even remote conversion rates that's worth it is when you boost a video on Facebook, but then you're just getting paid views, and I don't know how effective that is for growing your brand long term.
One of the things about this ad unit is, in particular, to do the audio ads on YouTube, it's a 15 to 30 second audio ad that plays in the middle of a video, which you could do a video ad for 15 to 30 seconds. You still get the companion banner either way. So I'm curious to see, will more people opt to do an audio ad in the middle of a video, or will they just continue to do video ads?
So I'm a little bit confused by that. What does it mean it's an audio ad in the middle of a video? Like,
I believe
it's be a blank screen with audio?
I believe you put up an image, like a banner image that plays. A lot of times you see podcasters say, I put my podcast on YouTube, and it's a static image of the episode, right, and it plays the audio. And I think that's what this ad format's like. I haven't tried it yet, but from the article, it seems like it's a static image that plays an audio ad in the middle of a video.
I mean, even that format just seems like, why would you put an audio ad on a video platform? Like, I don't understand how that would even convert either.
You do get the companion banner, so there is a click-through element that could happen there. Ruben?
Yeah, my only thought is, I do occasionally listen to podcasts on YouTube with the key word being listen. I don't watch podcasts on YouTube. If I'm going to listen to an entire episode of a podcast, I'm going to listen to it. I'm going to open up the tab and then I'm going to play it and then open up another tab and continue my work. So even if there is a banner element to it, I don't care. As a consumer, I don't care, because unless it's something that's going to capture my attention to the point where I'm like, oh, I not only do I need that, but I want that. I'm going to go back to that tab, figure it just doesn't make any sense to me at all. Mainly because I don't think people watch podcasts.
Yeah, unless it's a celebrity podcast. I'm sure a lot of people watch, probably Joe Rogan, Whitney Cummings is a big one, Bert Kreischer. A lot of the comedians tend to publish also on YouTube, and those do get views. But most people, like this show, if I were to publish an audio or video podcast version of this, it might get 100, 200 views. The most of the consumption comes through the audio medium. It seems to be when you have that celebrity brand or a comedian, an actor, actress, then you also happen to get the views on YouTube.
Yeah, but even then, if I'm watching, as an example, I really enjoy, and I'm gonna probably get a lot of heat for this, but I really enjoy Logan Paul's podcast. He has some great guests. If it's just a 5-minute clip, I might watch it. But if I'm listening to the entire hour-long podcast, I'm opening it in a tab and then moving on to another tab. I am not sitting there and watching an hour-long podcast. So the audio. So for me, the audio, having an audio ad in a YouTube video is pointless, because why? Again, and the price, my understanding is the price is the same as if you would do a video ad at the same price. So better bang for your buck would probably be just to do a video ad.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, if you could do, why would you not just make like a short video ad of you even just talking to the camera, like, hey, check out my podcast. I don't understand the appeal of an audio ad in the middle of a video platform. But one way, like talking about getting on other podcasts, and I think we probably all agree the best way to market your podcast is to market to people who already listen to podcasts within that, universe, and instead it's much easier than trying to move people across. And I don't know if you guys use Buzzsprout, but like recently they added a service where you can buy 5,000 ads for $100. So as a podcaster, and then you insert that ad into other podcasts. So
wow,
I haven't. So I was talking to a guy. He pays for the ads, and then I'm one of the people that my podcast qualifies to accept the ads. So those ads are inserted automatically into the middle of my show. I get to accept if I want to add them based on maybe the podcast niche doesn't fit mine, or I'm kind of like don't agree with it, whatnot. And I get paid 1.4 cents per download. And then I think that will cost him 2 cents per download, because it's 5,000 downloads for $100. So I was talking to him. He got let me just see, because he told me his stats. He got 5 new listeners for every 1,000 ads placed.
So it's still pretty low conversion rate there.
Yeah, but if you were getting $100 for 5,000. That'd be like 25 new listeners. So be not too bad. And he was able to get those metrics direct from Buzzsprout, who were actually able to tell him, like, yeah, you got 5 new listeners from this campaign. So still not great, but I think that's a much better alternative, to market your podcast than going down like the Facebook or the YouTube route.
Yeah, if they're subscribers, $5 per subscriber might not actually be that bad of a conversion. If they're just listeners and they click play, it might get pretty expensive pretty quickly. But that might lead into our next story. We're talking about podcasts. What are podcast apps? YouTube is a big place for podcasting, and now there's some hints based on a story from Insider Intelligence that TikTok is going after podcasting, and this ad's actually blaming YouTube, which I'm not sure about that one. But could TikTok be releasing a podcast app? Let's start with, would you even consider using TikTok as a podcast app?
I don't. I need to see more about what it actually means. It just seems like it's a totally different sidestep from TikTok, from short video content to a podcast app. So, I mean, if it's a new platform, I would get my podcast on every single platform available. I wouldn't prioritize TikTok over any others, but it could be another useful venture. But I mean, I think it says it in the article as well. Right? Facebook tried it and gave up after a year. It was absolutely useless. It was quite funny because, you know, with Facebook, they added the podcast function to it. And because I registered for it, every one of my podcasts, like everyone's, would just automatically get uploaded to the platform. And then I would automatically get a message from Facebook saying my episode had been removed because it went against community standards, even though it didn't. Like, it was like, my episodes are safe for work. It's about Vietnam. I have no idea what community guidelines I'd broken. It didn't tell you what community guidelines. There was no way to appeal against it. So I was like, great, you created this new platform where my episodes get uploaded and then taken off immediately. So it might go the same way as that.
Yeah, well, see, with TikTok, my thing is, you know, generally speaking, podcasts are long form. You know, you'll find some short form podcasts, but for the most part, TikTok is a 3-minute maximum. Some creators were approved for 10 minutes, and I don't know what happened with that. I don't see podcasting on TikTok being something that they're going to be able to, and I say that knowing that I've said this about TikTok in the past and they've proved me wrong, but podcasting and short form video just don't seem to go hand in hand unless you're cutting up, you know, 1 to 3 minute long videos to promote your podcast. I don't see this working at all unless they come in with a completely different app, a completely different platform that is just owned by TikTok. But you know, you look at even Spotify. Spotify is starting to cancel shows left and right, and seems to be, you know, the podcasting business doesn't seem to be doing much for Spotify, whose primary business is music streaming. And TikTok has done incredible work for musicians and you know, getting music viral. I don't know if it's going to be the same for podcasting at all.
One of the things they mentioned is YouTube now has a podcast channel, and one of the things you've heard me argue on previous episodes is YouTube really isn't a podcast app. Some the media companies love to pick up that YouTube's also now the #1 podcast app, but it's not really delivering podcasts through an RSS feed, which go back to episode 2 if you want to hear me argue that point. But TikTok with a billion monthly users, 138 million in the US, there's talk of this super app where you would go, you know, to do videos. Even Facebook was trying to be a super app where you could have payment methods and phone calls and video and podcasts. And it's a very difficult space to break into. Like you mentioned, Neil, Facebook tried it for a year, gave up. They really didn't put much effort into it. They just said, hey, you could add your RSS feed. And then they didn't do anything to promote it or deal with it. And Ruben, you mentioned Spotify, and these apps make money when the apps are open and people are streaming. And podcasts is a great way. It's a cheap way to acquire entertainment. If you can keep somebody on for an hour, that's an hour that you can sell advertising to. So I think with the way Spotify is moving, I think this is more of a move like Spotify more than it is a move like YouTube. Do you think this is maybe a play to just get the retention on site longer?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, because if you're able to successfully get somebody to listen to an hour-long podcast on your platform, which is why MultiMediaMouth.com a couple of years ago, we had a dozen different podcasts that we were trying to produce all at once. And it was just difficult to continue to have talent motivated through the growing phases of it. But if you're able to get people to come to your website and spend an hour a day or an hour, you know, longer than they would, you're going to see the interaction increase. But TikTok has built an audience that's used to 3 minutes or less on the platform. I don't see people sitting there and listening to podcasts for an hour, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever that podcast is going to be. I think the best tool, that for me at least, is taking a clip from my podcast, editing it up to be TikTok specific, and then throwing it up on there, hoping that either A, couple hundred people view that video and enjoy it, or B, out of those couple hundred people, a couple of them come and listen to the full podcast separately. I just don't see it happening. TikTok is trying to become a competitor to Amazon at the same time, a competitor to YouTube. At some point, you try to become all things to all men, and you become nothing to no one.
Neil?
Yeah, I mean, completely agree. It just seems like I don't understand. Yeah, like that's a great quote. Be something to all men. What was your quote there? That was a good one.
Become all things to all. What was it? I forgot. We have to listen to the replay. If you become all things to all men, become nothing to no one.
Yeah, like why not stick to what you're good at instead of trying to do like so many different. I think as well. I mean, I'm just like listeners' habits or consumers' habits. You know, you use TikTok for one thing. You know, you use another app for your podcast. You know, you use another app for YouTube. Like, this is not difficult to use these different apps. So why are they all trying to keep it? But obviously the reason is they want you to all stay in their app to do everything right. And I just don't think that's going to be the way ahead.
Yeah, I think if TikTok can grow a podcast audience, it's very because I've been listening to podcasts. I have my first iPod from 2007 sitting right here, and it was hard to go from an iPod to an Android phone just to get my podcast. And I use Pocket Cast. I'm a big fan of it. But if I had to go to another app, like I could see somebody who's getting into podcasting because they've gotten into TikTok, and maybe those TikTok creators are starting the podcast. Maybe they can get a whole new audience to start building that. But they got to be invested in it. Facebook certainly wasn't. And that one, you saw how that went after 365 days. So let's go.
Facebook,
okay.
Sorry, real quick. Facebook doesn't seem to really. Okay, no worries. Facebook doesn't really seem to be innovating anymore. They're trying to copy other people's successes because they're desperate for viewers. TikTok's not desperate for viewers. What they're desperate for is advertising dollars. And I think if TikTok is going to go down this path, they're going to have to at some point decide that one thing is their bread and butter, one thing is their core business, and something else is going to suffer. And I think if you are going to launch a podcast platform on a short form video platform, you're not going to risk losing your entire audience because you're going to be pushing these long form pieces of content. It's just not. I don't think it's going to work for TikTok.
It would be more interesting if they offered some sort of AI service that could then take your podcast or your video content and automatically produce it into TikTok sized videos that then you can promote, like you said, promote your show. Like, and without the real goal of like, I'm gonna build my show audience, because that might not actually do that. But with micro content, you're not. For me, when I produce micro content, I know that most of those people aren't going to convert to listeners, but they're still consuming your brand, right? Like they're still consuming like your micro content, right? Not everyone has to listen to an hour of my show. My episodes are like an hour long, but when I meet even one of my friends, and she's like, "Oh, that guest you had on was really interesting." And I was like, "Oh, cool. Did you listen to the episode?" "No, I just saw the reel on Instagram that you posted." But that's still cool. I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. You're still engaging with my show. You know what it is. You know who was on. Like, So I think there's two kind of different things going on there. There's the long form content for some people, and then there's the short form content. And that's where maybe TikTok would just be better promoting that short form content, helping content creators do that more easily, promote that, rather than being like, hey, we're just going to steal this long form content and shoehorn it into our existing app.
Yeah, well, and then so that brings, and sorry, Jeff, I totally hijacked this conversation, but
we're co-producer, Jeff. Yeah, Jay, you're the co-producer.
But I think the idea could potentially be that if TikTok was going to launch a podcast publishing wing that gave people the ability to have these videos associated with, like you said, and you upload to the TikTok platform that then distributes to everything else, and then gives you like my podcast service, Sounder FM, they give you like, hey, here's some keywords that might help you on SEO, and here's a clip that you might want to use. If TikTok was able to do that, I think it would be game changing, because then you're creating like Niall said, these micro content that will help you, that you can turn around, and when you're looking for more big name guests, like I'm looking for celebrity, D-list celebrity level people on which Jeff made. He made the list. I can go to these PR platforms and say, hey, my podcast gets X amount of downloads, but my TikTok clips of this podcast gets an additional X amount of views. Like my Miles Kennedy interview with all the clips did over 20,000 downloads. But it wasn't the actual podcast itself that got the downloads. It was all these micro content clips that had this high engagement rate.
Exactly. That was a big wake up call for me. There was one of my episodes did pretty well on the downloads, like about 200 downloads, which is a little bit more than normal. But then when I added up all the micro content, because a couple of those videos went viral, so it was the first time ever I got a spreadsheet and I added it all up, and it reached like over 9,000 people, and I was like, wow, like that's such a massive difference. Like 9,000 people consume my content, even if it was 10 or 15 seconds. So yeah, I think that's those things. TikTok and podcast can live together, but they're not the same thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Speaking of fictional characters, when we've been watching a lot of shows lately, and we keep seeing characters pop up in these shows that are podcasters. We've seen it spoofed on Silent Live. We see it in the reboot of Sex and the City. It's called In Just Like That. I've seen it just last night. I watched Ghostbusters Afterlife, and there's literally a character whose name is Podcast in the movie. And this brings me back to my childhood. I start to get, we talk about me and my weird thoughts, but from my childhood, I grew up skateboarding, punk rock, and real DIY. And in the 80s, 90s, you started to see this counterculture emerge into mainstream media. You would see TV shows with skateboarders, like Clueless had a main character who was a skateboarder, and Cheerio commercials had skateboarders, and it just made it weird. And so here we are, full circle. I'm a grown adult, and here we are. The passion that I have now is podcasting, and it's kind of started as this DIY counterculture thing, and here we are. So does this mean we've arrived, or I don't even know where the story goes? Are they getting it right? I guess when they showcase podcasters in movies and TV, are you seeing it being portrayed correctly?
Hey Jeff, sorry, real quick. My computer's about to die. I need to plug it in real quick. I'm so sorry. So
that's why we edit.
Yeah, give me 1 second, okay?
I'll even redo that question. It was so bad.
Yeah, let me just grab a drink of water.
Yeah, give me 1 second. I'm so sorry.
Hey, take a break. And this is the part of the show where we everybody disappears, and I just stand here by myself. Ruben didn't plan ahead with his charger. He's too busy keeping the bees. Old beekeeper Ruben. I can play that theme song again.
Oh, we made it.
Hey, welcome to Rise and Outshine, everybody. My guests are just arriving today.
Welcome to Rise and Outshine.
Oh, we're starting over.
Yeah. Oh, Neil, do you have is there another audio source? It's not a big deal because I can isolate your channel, but I hear an echo when Ruben's talking through you. I don't know if check.
Oh, well, what it is, I'm using the Zoom H5, but I can't get the headphones to come. Sorry, I can't get your audio to come out the headphones, so I can only hear myself. So your audio is coming out of the laptop.
But it's not a big deal. I can
hold on, wait. I know how to fix this.
I can denoise you.
All right. So now you're coming through the headphones, and I can't hear myself, but that should eliminate the echo.
Do you like to hear yourself? I hate hearing myself.
I can't do this without hearing myself.
Oh, when I hear myself, it slows me down, and I can't. I'm like, oh, I hear myself. Yeah, so lucky for you, I don't hear myself.
All right, but I think that should eliminate the echo now.
Perfect. And to Ruben, do you remember the topic? Here, I'll go. Are these movies and TV shows portraying podcasters correctly? To Ruben.
I haven't seen a TV show that has actually done a podcast well, just because I don't think Hollywood producers understand what podcasts are. Like this article from Vox talks about how these callers are these podcasters are taking callers. You don't do that on a podcast for the most part. I know I listen to Conan O'Brien's podcast quite a bit, and he'll have like people leave voicemail messages for him, and he'll play those on the show, and that's cool. And I've tried doing that same thing, or letters from listeners. That's something that can be done well. But live, if you're doing it live, it's not a podcast, in my opinion. That's just me. So I've never seen a television show do this correctly.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's just definitely confusion from a lot of people of what a podcast is. And yeah, probably big directors are like, oh, podcasts are in right now, so let's make this character a podcaster without actually knowing what it is. And, you know, even not everyone, we're all so invested in this industry that we know what it is inside out. But not everyone does. And there's a couple of people I've spoken to, you know, in real life. And I say, I'm a podcaster. I make podcasts. And it's happened a couple of times. They're like, I don't even know what a podcast is. How do I listen to it? Like, what is a podcast? And you have to be like, you know, it's like internet, but it's like radio, but on the internet, and you can listen to it at any time. But I was so shocked at first, but then I was like, yeah, I mean, if you just don't listen to podcasts, you don't know that it's on Spotify, you don't know that it's on Apple Podcasts, you don't know that you can download 30 apps and find them. If you just are not part of this world, then it's just a really different thing. So I think that's what it's just people not knowing what it is, and they're like, yeah, we'll make her a podcaster, and it's headphone and microphones, and then that's it.
I will say, so I'll take that back. The only show that I've ever seen that did podcasting correctly was the show on ABC called Proven Innocent. And it was a Innocent Project style podcast that they did. But it was, they did short clips of the podcast around the main story. That was the only show I've ever seen them do a podcast well. But I think even a lot of professional broadcasters don't understand what podcasting is, because they'll take their radio show, clip it up, and throw it on an RSS feed and say, oh, that's a podcast. Well, no, those are clips from your radio show. That's not a podcast.
But it's distributed by RSS feed, so it is a podcast.
Technically, yes.
That's my argument. But, you know, a lot of times for a movie to portray what is a podcaster, they're like, well, we know what radio's like. We think the audience will know what radio's like. We'll just make podcasting like radio. It's almost like whenever somebody's really smart in a movie and they do that montage of all the numbers coming over their face, like E equals MC squared, square root of 89. And like they do like this, like, oh, that guy's smart. He's got numbers on his face. And so they're like, okay, well, this is podcasting. It's like radio.
Well, yeah, if you don't know what podcasting is, the closest thing that everyone knows what it is radio. But it's not the same. I mean, from a technical aspect of it, yeah, podcasting really is any audio form that you upload to an RSS feed. Okay, cool. But the reality of it is it's there's more to it. There's a culture behind it. There's a way that you do it, you know, and each genre has their own style and their own rules of how they operate as a podcast. Just like, you know, everyone. Yeah, my point, you know, what I'm saying is, you know, Joe Rogan is a podcaster. He has conversations with people, you know, but it's an audio show first. It's not on the radio. It's not taking callers. It's either in person or over Zoom. There's a big difference between what Hollywood is portraying podcasters to be versus what podcasting actually is. And I think a lot of it is that the podcasting life isn't as glamorous as people think it is.
Wait. People think podcasting is glamorous?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Let me tell you something. Every time I tell people that I have a podcast, oh my God, that's so cool. Like, you must have, I'm like, it's an hour conversation and then hours upon hours of editing and it's not glamorous. Radio's glamorous, especially today's version of radio. Television's glamorous. Podcasting is not.
Speaking of the perfect segue, podcasts can be glamorous. If you're reading the Block Club Chicago, there's a new rentable podcasting studio in the West Loop that offers a Ritz Carlton experience. Now, we've all kind of talked about this before the show. It's a concept that I'm very interested in, and my guests are also very interested in, but we're not sure how to make it work. So I think let's first talk about this amazing space and what we read about this place. It's a one-stop space. It's 700 square feet. You get a lounge, a 4-person sit down and a recording table. But let's talk about the prices. It starts at $350 per episode, or $750 for a premium package that includes the editing and the clips. Now, we said, is podcasting glamorous? This is pretty glamorous.
Well, let me start off by asking: has anyone here ever made $350 off of one episode?
I don't know if I've made $350 off of 80 episodes, so definitely not from one.
I will say, so summer 2020, my podcast is now an archive. You're my best friend, a podcast about life, friendship, and tacos. We made about $3,000 over the summer of 2020. It was an incredible run. It was a fluke, and we got demonetized after it all. But even then, if that was something that I was consistently able to do on the regular, I don't think I would want to spend $350 an episode, even if they're offering a really nice studio with AC and 4 guest spots and whatever. It just, to me, does not seem like a smart investment. And what it seems like is it's targeting people who have lots of money and lots of free time, who want to do podcasting as a hobby, and can spend thousands of dollars a year doing this. It's not something that I think the everyday podcaster would even consider doing. If it was like $50 an episode, maybe I'd consider. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's the evolution of podcasting, though. Like, it's quite interesting. You were saying about how comparing it to the punk scene, and it used to be this, indie DIY scene, and it's definitely moving past that, I think, to become more professional. So I see it more as also definitely like people with a bit of extra cash, they just want to do a podcast, but more, backed by business, I guess, that like a company that is like, yeah, we want to make a podcast for marketing or for branding, and then they're going to spend that money. So not like the individual podcaster is not going to be like, yeah, $350 for an hour in a studio. Whereas if you are making a podcast for a business and you're like, hey, we can do it like this, they're maybe more likely to be like, yeah, that's a great deal. Marketing says yes, let's go.
That's like when your CEO comes in and says, we should be doing podcasting. And you say, you're right. Let's go to this studio and let them handle it. It might be a great move for corporate gigs and big businesses. If you want to jump right into it without, teaching a whole marketing department what a podcast is, how to market a podcast, you could literally walk in there, and for $750 for a CEO of a corporation, that's probably a pretty good deal.
Yeah, I don't think it's scandalous. Like in terms of the indie podcaster, then yeah, they're never going to do it. But I think in terms for a company, I think that's like you get the Ritz Carlton experience, and like so one of the podcasts I make, the first episode we did was in my like home studio, aka my spare bedroom, and there was no AC and it was hot, and there was only 2 of them because it was like the intro episode. And they were like, we're going to be interviewing people like in our industry after this. We can't do this in your spare bedroom. It's too hot, so like, let's go make it in our office. It's bigger and blah, blah, blah. So I still make it. I have to bring all my equipment, which means I charge them a little bit more because I have to like pack up all my stuff, bring it there, install it there. So I'm thinking in terms of like a business like that, and they're a beer business, but if you have like a business that's interviewing CEOs, you're going to want that really top-notch experience. And I think in that sense, then it's more likely to be like, yeah, no, we will absolutely pay this to bring in a CEO and be like, okay, sit there. Now we're going to sit down and do this interview in this podcast. So I think it's a really cool thing. It's something I thought about doing here in Saigon, was creating a podcast studio. I was looking at doing it in a container, which was quite close to happening. That's a big thing, I think, in the US as well. Quite a cheap way to do it. Fill it with sound panels, bring all the equipment in and things like that. One of the biggest barriers was safety. I wasn't sure how safe the container would be with like thousands of dollars of equipment just sitting there. Not that Saigon is like particularly dangerous, but like any major city, it has theft, and so that was the biggest downfall. But if it was in a building with a really secure space, then it's something I'm definitely looking at doing here in Saigon.
Yeah, I just think, if you think about it, most podcasts release at least 1 episode a week, and so you're thinking about 52 episodes a year, give or take. Unless and there's different models, but to me it seems like the better business model would be to just rent out an office yourself and build out a really good experience. And for the price. I mean, I'm not good at math, so we're talking about a couple $1,000s a year here. I just, to me, even as even if you were a CEO of a company who's launching a podcast for your brand, you're probably going to have the space in your office, or you can get the space for cheap, by expanding your office a little bit. It just doesn't make sense realistically. And the people that I've had in studio, they tend to just like being in studio. They don't care if they get champagne and hors d'oeuvres and all this stuff. And I've had the opportunity to interview some high-end guests in years past, and literally they're happy with a water bottle and a handshake in a nice AC'd room.
Now, 750 times 52 is $39,000 a year.
Yeah.
You could, even if you brought in entry level, depending on where you are, in the world, in the country, 35,000. I'm sure you could find somebody right out of college who would love to be a podcast editor.
I'd do it for 35,000.
Yeah. So I mean, you could have, like Ruben saying, maybe for the one-off, to bring your CEO in for I need to turn something around quick, and maybe show the CEO what's possible. But for the long term, absolutely, for that price, you could certainly build it in-house. But I think for a one-off, it's not a terrible deal for that corporate level podcast creation. Did I get the last word?
When you add it up like that, yeah, I mean, it's if you went to if some company was like, yeah, we want to make a podcast, and you came back with a budget, and you're like, okay, so it's going to be at least $35,000 a year just for the studio space, then my salary, and then all the other costs, and they might bulk at that pretty quickly. But that's not surprising, right? Because you get that quite often. Like, you can mention, like, let's make a podcast, and then, I mean, I've had it where I get people contact me and they're like, hey, we want to make a podcast, and I'm like, all right, cool, and I'll sit down with them and I'll tell them, okay, well, microphone, $100 already. They're like, you see their eyes light up, like, well, they think they're just going to do it on the phone maybe, and then you tell them your fees and then the other fees and how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take, and then I never hear from them again. It's like that. It's like a 15-20 minute conversation and it's done.
Well, even sorry to interrupt, but even with people I've talked to, I'm like, I will send you a microphone that you can plug into your computer and use. The time itself is a lot of times they don't want to do it, but the reality of it is, you're looking at, if you're a corporate entity wanting to do a podcast, you're looking at, say we're taking the example of a weekly podcast out of the year, $50,000 minimum between the podcast space and then the staff that because they can edit it for you and put everything together for you doesn't mean that's going to get out on the internet and be marketed properly. Do you really want to spend that much money a year when you just hire someone in-house? And what do you have to make as a return on that podcast? How many pieces of product are you going to have to sell in order to make a return on that podcast?
That's what I was about to say. It really would be like, what is your ROI you're expecting, right? Like if you're doing, but so I'm just thinking though, I actually make a podcast for a company here as well. And their reason for doing it is not mass consumption. They actually did it as a reason to get in touch with their customer base, to kind of reactivate existing customers. Mm-hmm. So they had like a few hundred businesses on the list. And the guy was really honest. The CEO was like, we just do a really bad job at keeping in touch with them. And because we don't really have a reason to talk to them. So we want to make this value-based podcast based on their niche. So we're not doing it to promote it. They don't do any social media promotions. They literally just do it to send it out in their mailing list. And I see the download numbers, they're really, really small, but it worked. Like, they got a massive contract out of it from one of the people that they sent it to. And they're like, oh, hey, we haven't heard from you guys in ages. Let's talk about doing another project. And so I don't know how much they made from that. I know they didn't spend very much. We didn't use a $750 studio to make it. We actually made it in lockdown. So it was all done over Zoom actually. But that for them was a huge ROI because it did what they wanted to do. So I can see a need for this. I don't think we should knock this guy's business too much. It says he spent $20,000 to create it. And I think it's a cool space. And if it's all in one with video and podcast, I think it's good that those spaces are available. Like anything, it's maybe out of reach for the average Joe who's not going to spend that amount of money. But I think it's cool that it's available.
Yeah, Neil, like the strategy you mentioned, sometimes it's a 2-3 year courtship on the sales side where it takes them might take a company 2 or 3 years to pull the trigger and go with their product, but that product might be $100,000 a year product. If you're putting in the time with this podcast and you're doing that nurturing, once a week, without reach out, it's just, passive. We're talking about what we do. We're talking about our passion for our product. And then at the end of the year, you might cut that sales cycle in half maybe, and it's $100,000 sale, but you only had 20 downloads. You're going to call that podcast a failure?
Their product is like in that price range. Like it's a very, very expensive product. So yeah, I mean, they were really happy about it.
Yeah. And again, at the end of the day, it really depends on what the goal of your podcast is.
Yeah.
For me, if I had an extra $750 laying around or $350 laying around that I'm going to invest in my podcast, it's not going to be in the space. It's just not.
Yeah.
Especially
YouTube ads.
If anything, yeah, I'd rather just spend it in ads in the space. But I'm looking at I'm looking at some of the pictures here, and it looks like it'd be one thing if they had really nice microphones and a really nice soundboard. They say they have 4K video, but they have like $100 microphones, so it's like, I'm not, again, for that price, I can go buy a couple really nice microphones, and buy a decent camera and make this look really good on my own. So I'm not gonna hate the guy for trying to make money, and he built a space out that he needed as well. I feel bad if he thinks that this is going to be a business that's going to take off the way that he's expecting it to. I don't know if it's going to do what he wants it to do.
You're right. I don't see it as a small time, one-off content creator, but I do think that there is potential there in the business space, and that is going to bring us to the end of the show. Neil and Ruben, I want to thank you so much for joining me tonight. This is where I turn it over to you. Shameless plugs, whatever you want to talk about. Neil, we'll start with you because you're the first guest on this show. We didn't mention this. You're the first guest to ever call in from the future. You're a day ahead. It's already Monday where you're at. We're still back here in Sunday. So, Neil, tell us about
no
yourself.
Spoilers.
Yeah, don't tell us the Steelers are playing right now, so don't tell me if they win or lose.
There's football on, right? I'm a big American football fan, so I keep forgetting it's on Monday morning. Yeah, no, I think I deserve extra credit because I set my alarm at 6 a.m. this morning and got up just to do this podcast at 7 a.m. Had to take the dog out early, and so I'm calling in from Vietnam. It's Monday morning. I'm from Scotland, but Saigon based. So started a podcast a few years ago, like most people, as a hobby, and then lost my job during the pandemic, and then from there it kind of became more of a full-time business, and still working on it, but it's getting better and better. And then I've spent most of this year building an online podcast course, really aimed at beginners, so nobody in this call, but it's really, when you're part of these forums and you see people just starting and asking a lot of the basic questions, like what microphone to use is the biggest one, right? How do I get more downloads? How do I edit? Just the kind of the real basic questions. So it's 3 hours of video content, 23 video lectures with the PDFs and the transcripts, and access to myself as well. Like I share my email address if people want to get some extra advice. So I don't try and promote it. Like, it's not like some podcast course are like, we're going to help you grow your show and monetize it, and you're going to get 100,000 downloads. I can't guarantee that. I'm not going to do that. So it's no gimmicks. It's just for podcast beginners to learn how to do it, basically. So I mentioned to Jeff that if I'm going to give away one course to a listener of this show. So if they want to get in touch with me right now, I'm giving it away for free, so you can check it out. So just I guess you'll put my email in the show notes, or it's neil@7millionbikes.com, NIALL at 7millionbikes.com, and I'll send you the course for free to check it out.
Awesome. Thank you. That's super generous. Thank you, Neil. 7millionbikes.com. All that will be in the show notes. Ruben, Ruben Jay.
Yeah, I'm here to promote Neil's podcast course as well. So 7millionbikes.com. Actually, what's really interesting is Jeff was actually on my show, the Ruben Jay show, yesterday. So it's out now. Head over to rubenjay.com. to find the best link, rubenj.com/listen, to be able to listen to the podcast, or head over to multimediamouth.com for whatever I do there. The Ruben Jay Show is your one-stop shop for all things entertainment.
Neil and Ruben, thank you so much. All those will be in the show notes. The one thing you can do to help the show, support the guests, click those links, let them know that you heard them on the show. If you like what you heard, subscribe, leave us a review. That's my favorite thing. Let us know how we're doing. And until next time, we'll see you next time.
We're asking the experts, we're all on a mission to rise in the rankings and outshine the competition. Welcome to Rise and Outshine.
Boom.